first guest in our studio is political analyst Lukhona Mnguni. Very good afternoon to you, Mthembu. Thank you very much for your time. Let's start perhaps with the man who started it all, Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, and of course the allegations that he put before all of us last Sunday. Just what you made of it all.
Well, good evening for you. Good evening, Naledi.
Thanks for joining us.
Lovely to be with you this afternoon into the evening. I suppose, Vuyo, the first is that I think all of us were caught off guard 7 days ago. I was busy with church issues. And then the next thing, around 1 o'clock, my phone was abuzz. I'm like, what's going on? Hey, have you seen this? Hey, and then the report started coming through. And I think two things caught my attention. One was the choreography of the entire press briefing, having, armed people around him. Him, of course, in his special force, uniform. He usually is on his blue uniform and so on. I think my takeaway was that the choreography communicated two things. One, that of course there's a serious problem with the criminal justice system, and not just policing. And I know that the conversation over the last days has tended to narrow what he said about, the issues on Sunday to just policing. It's a far bigger conversation. I think we'll get into that. I mean, it's the entire criminal justice system that is implicated. But the second for me was Mkhwanazi made a political statement without having to be political. And that political statement was to say, if now there is a political vacuum in the country, insofar as dealing with criminality, insofar as dealing with violence, I, Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, in this province where I am in charge, I am on combat mode. I'm combat ready to confront crime. Because remember, crime is a function of political will. If you remember, last year, Parliament became very seized with the issue of extortionists across the country. I mean, political statements were made by the minister, task team. We saw Zamazamas, being cracked down on very seriously and so on. But he's clearly saying that, I mean, these efforts that have happened so far have not been enough to root out what the crisis is, and we'll get to that. But I think for me that was the takeaway. There were two statements: crisis in the crime intelligence, in the criminal system, criminal justice system. Secondly, a political statement to say a political vacuum will no longer be tolerated in dealing with criminality and corruption in this country.
Yeah, I do think a little bit later perhaps we'll actually unpack everything that he put on the table 7 days ago, that being the KZN Police Commissioner. But there's been something to be said, surely, about the timing of the president to respond. The statement saying that the president is in Brazil. Once he is back in the country, he will address the matter, seemingly quite a bit of impatience in the country to hear from the president. What do you make of the 7 days, the speed of the president to respond?
I think to a degree we have to be realistic as to what was at the president's disposal. You'll remember that just a weekend before he had postponed an international trip because of tantrums from one of his key partners in the government of national unity. So he had missed Spain, and he couldn't miss Rio in terms of the BRICS summit. And of course, as he said, he didn't know that this was coming. So as he flew out, and I think that's the political statement I'm also alluding to in terms of Mkhwanazi's own timing. To say the commander-in-chief of armed forces is out of the country, and we are going to begin a conversation. And of course, he arrived back. We know that the deputy president, the former deputy president, David Mabuza, was being, laid to rest yesterday. So I think there needed to be time to respect that mourning period, but also give the president a bit of time to return and then be able to get various briefings from the implicated people, as he said, but I also think from national intelligence services like the State Security Agency.
Let's start then with the first of the two issues that you say what happened on Sunday actually communicated as far as you were concerned. The criminal justice system. We've always known that there's a lot wrong with our criminal justice system, from the police's ability to investigate, to get people arrested and everything that goes with that, to people being put in prison but taking very long time, and you know also the criminality that happens inside our prisons, to the courts that are seriously overloaded, underfunded, which allows for the mills of the entire justice system to grind very slowly. Let's talk about that. No, unpack a little the problems of the criminal justice system.
Well, I suppose if we just start with the police as an institution, for a very long time, our police as an institution have been dogged with serious issues. Hardly any national commissioner has completed a term after the first term of 5 years, 1995 to 2000. Then Celebi came through. And it's been a series, really, of scandalous national commissioners after the other, whether it's because they are underqualified. I mean, part of the problem is in those who have to appoint these people, where they've outsourced the police service as an institution for a long time to a leadership of people who had no policing background, whether you're looking at former national commissioners in Ria Pierre, Begitele, and so on. So there's been that cry, because I mean, these are institutions that are led by a chain of command. Therefore, rank does matter, respect is earned, and of course, decorations matter in those kind of institutions for your peers to then say, I can respect this leader because they've been through the ranks. That's the first. So those appointments have always been seen as the politicization of the top echelons of the policing service as a service. Of course,
the arguments that were presented back then, I mean, seemed to make sense. You know, that you need a well-oiled machinery that will enable, facilitate, in order for the trained and experienced police women and men to be able to do their jobs. In other words, the people at the top weren't necessarily going to be the ones who actually do the jobs, but would even to the point of be there, even to the point of protecting those people so that they can be allowed to do their work.
Well, of course, those are political statements to allow for a politicization of an institution. There's nobody who would go for a heart surgery and would be comfortable with a process that is not led by a cardiologist. And it's led by an engineer, an obscure engineer, structural engineer. They say, you are in theater now. The person who's overlooking your heart surgery is a structural engineer. So politicians are very good at selling narratives, but not necessarily very good at being honest about what is behind those imperatives. In the defense, nobody has tried to appoint a chief of defense who's not from the rank and file of the South African National Defense Force. So I think there's always been a desire to capture the police service because of its critical, standing in society, because they are first on the crime scene. They draw up the dockets to hand over to the NPA to make determination whether to prosecute or not. They gather the evidence. So it's a massive institution and it's an important institution. And in an environment where politicians have an appetite for corruption, it's one of the institutions that you must politically capture. So I think, yes, we accept the reasons that would have been given there, but it would probably have been much more rewarding if they had focused on career police officers to lead that institution. And the other part for you, that is the weakness of the South African Police Service. I once spoke to somebody when I was visiting the African Union, and they said, one of the problems in South Africa is that you have not behaved like a post-conflict society, because in a post-conflict society, you accept that there are certain institutions that you must reimagine and remake, not only in terms of their culture. I mean, if you think about it, the first mandate of the South African Police Service after 1994 was to amalgamate all these various police forces, the national one, which was the apartheid regime's one, the ones in the Bantustans, and all of these into one police service.
Former guerrillas.
All of these things. And what we did not attend to, though, beyond amalgamation, are institutional culture questions, the kind of police service that we are looking for that will align, as the mandate was given back then, to the evolving legislation. Of course, the Constitution itself had not been adopted at the time, so aligning it to the Constitution. You'll remember the big debate around the National Development Plan, when in 2009, government came and said, we are going to rename this thing into the South African Police Force, and we are going to introduce military ranks. And there was a big outcry in society. And so this institution has been contested in a serious way.
Yeah, there's lots for us to discuss, and we're going to obviously start looking at the various other, allegations that the police minister in KZN has put forward. Some of those, of course, even are going as far as to allege that there is the involvement even of the judiciary in criminal activity in the country. We'll unpack that and more on the other side of this. So do stay with us. Welcome back. We continue to count down to President Cyril Ramaphosa's address set to take place at 7 o'clock. But as we get closer and closer to that, we really look back at some of the allegations that 7 days ago the KZN Police Commissioner put to the country. Damning allegations indeed, allegations of political interference in the criminal justice system, even the involvement of members of parliament, the judiciary, prosecutors, and so much more. We continue, of course, to analyze that with Mr. Lukhona Mnguni, who is in studio with us. And one of the things that I think was really concerning that we heard from the KZN Police Commissioner were the allegations of even the involvement of the judiciary. We did see this week the Office of the Chief Justice saying, bring us the proof, but the implications of those kinds of allegations, especially for public trust in the judiciary.
No, absolutely. It's a very important thing to interrogate because if you look at our institutions of democracy, one of the institutions tasked, with serious independence and to, be fair in adjudicating matters that come before it is the judiciary. And I think Kwanas was quite tactful in how he presented that because he did say judiciary and then quickly said, maybe don't me say judiciary and let me talk about a specific judge. There's a specific judge. And I wonder if given an opportunity to then present information about that judge, he would be able to. And that's partly probably will get into what does the president need to do for all of these allegations to be really tested. The judiciary has always stood as a highly contested terrain. At times, politicians, when they don't know what to do with it because it does not serve and service them in their interests, they sometimes lambast it. There was a time, we remember the cartoon over 10 years ago of Lady Justice, for example, which was really probably the most grotesque thing you could see in terms of what the assault on the judiciary was at the time. We've had politicians talking about judicial overreach in terms of, dabbling into the terrain of politics. But the judiciary does not invite cases to sit before them. The issue here, Naledi, is whether or not amongst those judges who sit on the bench to adjudicate matters, there are uncompromised judges. Now, recently we've started to see judges being impeached. We are seeing matters being brought before the Judicial Conduct Tribunal. That process takes a bit of a long time, but we are seeing that judges are not beyond reproach themselves and ought to be held to account. The issue here, in terms of Mkwanaz's presentation, is whether or not there are judges who are captured by some of these criminal syndicates and therefore they are compromised insofar as they are able to adjudicate certain matters and their impartiality is affected when these matters come before the bench. Now, there are structural problems, I think, in a country which has growing criminality and violence such as ours, whether or not certain judges feel that they are safe enough to adjudicate certain matters, and whether or not the sense of fear over certain cases might actually impair their impartiality. I mean, if you are a judge and you are sitting on a case and there is a lawyer of one of the people to the matter, one of the accused in a gangster matter, he's dropping off his child in Cape Town and he's shot dead in front of the school. I'm sure that probably does something, and the judiciary has to ask itself whether it truly believes, beyond at a theoretical level, its members are safe and secure enough to believe that the remnants of this criminality and violence would not be visited into their own individual and personal lives, and therefore it affects how they adjudicate matters. Of course, the other one, which is much more serious, is as to whether or not there are corrupt judges. You will remember during the Zondo Commission, a magistrate was suspended because he was implicated in having received bribes. as a sitting magistrate, and he had to be, suspended and vacate his seat and so on. So the point is that whilst we accept that the independence of the judiciary must be maintained, the respect for the judiciary must be intact, but it cannot be at the expense of overlooking, even if it's a minority, because all of those elements which compromise the standing of the judiciary have to be weeded out, and processes have to be put in place for that to happen.
Yeah, it begs the question, though, if we would likely see more coming from the KZN Police Commissioner, perhaps even naming and shaming within the judiciary, as he did, for instance, with the police minister. I think that's an interesting point to make, and the expectation of whether or not we'll see names coming forward from him. I
guess it's for that reason that many political parties, but also people, are saying perhaps a judicial, commission, is the way to go, because this is not about, or this is not just about Senzo Mchunu. This is not just about Ndlandla Mkhwanazi. We are being taken to where we should have been, or should have started in the first instance. And I think, earlier it was Paul Hoffman from Accountability Now who was talking about that court judgment that said you need to put together this institution that will deal with these issues. Of course, not just that institution that will play, and adjudicate over these matters, but we need to go back and sort the problems we overlooked over the years, whether deliberately or by omission. But we need to go back there. And the people who are making an argument for an inquiry are saying, hopefully it'll give us an opportunity to deal with these issues, hopefully once and for all.
Absolutely. And I suppose the biggest test for the president tonight is going to be how far is he willing to go? How much political will is he willing to look many criminal elements within the criminal justice systems? An unfortunate thing, because we've been seeing anecdotal evidence that things are not well. The Thabo Bester case, it's as if we've completely forgotten about it. Here is a person allegedly was burned to death inside a cell, whereas a dead body was procured into a very high CMEX kind of prison, with hardened criminals. A body was procured, put in there, pretended that the family never got to bury their loved one. That is a serious, serious breach of security. So correctional services is implicated. Just a few days ago, this Ket Matlala, who was mentioned by Mkhwanazi, a spot check was done by correctional services, and voila, he was found with a cell phone. Maybe another cell phone to be screened and to see who he has been talking to whilst he's inside prison. The question around prosecutions, the bribing and bribery of prosecutors, why do people's dockets go missing? Something is wrong in that system. We know Vuyo anecdotal stories and we dismiss them, say, no, there's no evidence. People will tell you back there where I come from in the towns of Flagstaff, Lusigi, no, the assumption is that the person who killed somebody was actually let out of prison to commit the crime and then taken back to prison because it's harder to trace people like that. But the Thabo Bester case, again, confirms to us that these things are possible. And therefore, there's a lot that rests on the shoulders of the president tonight. And I think he needs to come out, and it's going to be interesting how he choreographs his own address to the nation. Will he be by himself? Will he be with the generals of the various armed forces? Because I think tonight the president must come out as the commander-in-chief of armed forces. This is about restoration of confidence in the rule of law, and you can only restore confidence in the rule of law by affirming your authority over the institutions, because currently what is happening, even the circus that has happened after the president spoke on Sunday, or on Monday, people say, no, as much as the president has asked for restraint, we are still going to talk. That is undermining exactly, because you know what that meant in terms of restraint. No more public statements by everybody until I'm back. But no, because people are playing politics. To them, this is another football, political football that is at play. Save my name, salvage my image, try and, do something to preempt the actions of the president and not necessarily give the president the necessary space as the commander-in-chief of armed forces. And I think tonight, he has to come out with that kind of authority. And I mean, he may well say institutionally there are things he's constrained to do, doesn't want to be seen as interfering and so on, but I think he has to grab that authority. Of course, there are also very limited, constitutional and legal avenues available to the president. So I know people are saying, yeah, we are tired of commissions and so on, but that is but one of the avenues available to him, because if you look at the Commissions Act, the commission really does work on behalf and at the behest of being appointed by the president. He's got the opportunity to write the terms of reference in terms of how far it has to go. My suggestion has been over the week that that inquiry needs to almost be of a hybrid nature. Hybrid nature in this sense. There are a lot of wounded people who have walked the corridors of the criminal justice system, whether it's through the hawks, whether it's through the magistrates' courts, whether it's through the police and so on, who have worked with ministers, who have worked with commissioners and generals. And I think they would not take up the opportunity to give evidence in a public inquiry. And I think we must accept that there's a bit of a sensitivity to some of these issues. So I would suggest that there must be an avenue open in that inquiry for people to submit information anonymously and confidentially. Of course, there must be instruments to verify the information that comes from there, but allow a very robust whistleblowing kind of avenue. And I mean, the South African Council of Churches did this during the years of state of capture, when they did the unburdening process, which allowed people to privately go and make certain confessions and give information. That information was collated into a document that could be then. And of course, then there must be the part where people like Mkhwanazi, who are willing to speak publicly, are then given the opportunity to speak publicly. Of course, it must be expeditiously conducted so that it is not another commission that goes on forever, but it has a time frame. But that's one, that's process. Then there's the politics that the president has to attend to. And that is the question about how far does he go, particularly with the Minister of Police. And of course, what is the response? Not only from his organization. This is a wounded president. He has 40%. He's got 9 other parties he's governing with in the government of national unity. So I saw your insert, for example, on the DA, the Democratic Alliance saying they've already opened a case against the minister for lying to Parliament.
That at least is MK party.
That at least MK party. That at least is established. Because in March he said he doesn't know, and he doesn't say he asked for the name. He says he asked for the face of this person, and he could tell he doesn't know the person. Down the line in July, he's now very entangled. The political entanglement is going on with the minister. Said, no, actually I've met, he's a comrade. So did you meet him after 5 March? As the Anders insert was telling us.
You shown the wrong face.
Or you shown the wrong face. And so many unanswered questions. But I think that politically, how the president responds is also going to be, indicative of whether or not, and of course, Senzo Mchunu is not just his comrade in the ANC. This is one of the people whom, if you looked at the CR17 leaked statements at least, was even receiving a monthly pay from CR17, because you'll remember the time in KZN he had been jolted out of his role as premier by the new leadership, and he was sitting at home, but he was galvanizing support across the length and breadth of KZN and South Africa on behalf of the president ahead of the 2017 National Conference. So,
including in the Northwest,
the president, yes, and
Brown,
and you remember the so-called recount for the Secretary General post, which was narrowly won by it's only a matter of 5 years, comrades Ace Magashule. So it's really a moment of reckoning for the president, but I think he will take comfort in knowing that this is his last term, and whether or not for the first time in a long time he will be able to restore some semblance of confidence in himself with the general populace of South Africa.
Just one issue, though, just on this issue in the couple of minutes that we have left. The people who are, or a lot of the people who, whether it's those who are raising the issue or saying we should go the route of an inquiry, or those who support the idea, there are people who then take it further, but to say, but with our record and history, of inquiries. The issue has not been the willingness or ability to actually set them up or agree to setting them up, but what we then do, what we then get to have after the inquiries, that we do not have a particularly good record of acting on the findings and recommendations of virtually every inquiry we've had.
Yeah, and if I can just step in there, actually, one of the conversations we had this week was with the former Premier of KZN, Willie Simkhunu, who spoke about the political killings task team coming from the recommendations of the Mwerane Commission, and once again, his dissatisfaction with the implementation of those recommendations.
No, absolutely. I mean, I remember the Mwerane Commission very well. I was in KZN at that time, and we had been raising this issue of political killings for a very, very long time. It was quite clear that there is an intersection between politics, crime intelligence, and all of these issues. But just quickly, Vuyo, there's only one response to the question. It means that we have not had fit-for-purpose presidents, because as I've said, the Commissions Act is very clear. The Commission of Inquiry Act at the behest of the President. President receives the information, and then it's the President's duty to ensure that there is the implementation. Therefore, again, it talks about this question around political will. How far is the President willing to go? With the Zondo Commission, we've seen, he then said this is an implementation plan to Parliament. How far are we with that implementation plan? How robust has it been held to account? The Siriti Commission we saw was taken to court and set aside. So the Falam Commission on Marikana, which actually had a series of issues to say about the state of policing, the leadership of policing, the broken chain of command in policing, and all of these things. And that was 2012, 13 years ago, and there's still very little justice for the people of Marikana, and the President himself is entangled on that issue and has not been able to detangle himself. So I'm trying to say, if we say nothing has been done, that means we have not had presidents who are fit for purpose, who commission those inquiries with noble intents.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about, and we're getting closer and closer. It's just before 6 o'clock, so just over an hour before we see the President at the Union Buildings take the podium and address the country, respond to those allegations made 7 days ago today by the KZN Police Commissioner of political interference in the criminal justice system, linking senior officials in the SAPS to syndicates operating out of Gauteng. We'll continue with your coverage on the other side of this. Stay with us.